You're working more hours than ever before, more productive, more qualified, and yet you look at your bank account and see the same number as always, maybe a little more, maybe even less, considering inflation. Why? Why doesn't all this effort get you to where you want to be? The answer will shock you because it contradicts everything you were taught. And it comes from a man who turned $30,000 into more than $12 billion over 4 decades. Stanley Druckenmiller. He never worked more hours than you. He never had 2 jobs. And yet, he built one of the greatest fortunes in modern history. The problem is not how much you work. It's where you put your work. This mathematical distinction separates people who work their entire lives and end up with little from people who work strategically and end up with abundance. Over the next 25 minutes, I'll show you exactly why your job can be your biggest trap and how Druckenmiller broke that trap using principles you can apply today. Stanley Druckenmiller doesn't believe in working hard, believes in working right. During an interview with the Economic Club of New York in 2015, he was direct. The difference between average and extraordinary success is not in working harder. It is in understanding where your work goes. And this is where there is specific mathematics that can be measured, tested, and replicated. Before continuing, a question that separates 2 types of people. Do you make financial decisions based on verifiable data or on vague feelings and advice from people who have never proven competence? If you chose data, subscribe to this channel now. Everything I share is backed by institutions like the Federal Reserve and the National Bureau of Economic Research. Press sign up. Over the next few weeks, you'll want to be here because I'm going to reveal mathematical principles that most never learn. And the difference between knowing and not knowing these principles is literally the difference between freedom and financial imprisonment. Why do you work so hard and still stay in the same place? Most look for 3 obvious solutions. First, work more hours. Second, seek promotion. Third, get a second job. And here's the problem. No one tells you. These 3 solutions are exactly what keeps you stuck in the same vicious cycle, generation after generation. I will show you with mathematics that it cannot be disputed. Imagine that you earn $3,000 a month. You decide to work more and manage to increase it to $3,500. Earnings of $500. It feels like real progress, but your expenses go up because you have less free time. Eat out more. Pay more for convenience. Spend more on things that relieve the stress of working too much. In the end, you're saving maybe $200 more per month. 200 times 12 months. $2,400 per year. With inflation averaging 3% per year, these $2,400 lose $72 of purchasing power in the first year. You worked hundreds of overtime hours to effectively gain $2,328 in real power. Dividing by 12 months, you earned $194 real dollars per month for your extra effort. Less than $7 a day, less than the price of 2 decent coffees in any major American city. This is the trap of linear work that traps billions of people around the world. Your time is fixed, 24 hours a day. Your energy is finite. You can't work productively for much more than 10 or 12 hours a day. Your hourly rate has a ceiling. Even in well-paid professions, there is a limit to how much someone pays for their hourly rate. You are trapped in a linear system where more effort generates more results, but always within brutally tight physical and temporal limits. Druckenmiller understood this very early in his career. In documented testimony to the Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation, he explained that in 1977, when he started as an equity analyst at the Bank of Pittsburgh, he noticed something that would completely change his trajectory. Older analysts worked as many hours as he did. Some worked even more. But they weren't getting significantly richer through the work itself. They were getting rich because of what they did with the money their work generated. This subtle but crucial distinction changed everything. Here comes the second mathematical shock that will challenge everything you believe about building wealth. While you are stuck in linear work that grows arithmetically, there is geometric growth available to everyone. And the difference is not small. It's the difference between ending up with 50,000 or 5 million. I'm going to be even more specific about this difference because abstract numbers don't create real impact. We need to see the concrete numbers to feel the mathematical difference. Between linear and exponential growth, I'll show it with numbers that you can check on any calculator. Person A works hard, manages to save $500 a month, and saves it under the mattress, or in a checking account that yields nothing. After 30 years of saving $500 a month, $180,000. It seems like a lot. It seems like 3 decades of discipline were worth it. But let's adjust for inflation of 3% per year over these 3 decades. The real purchasing power of these $180,000 is equivalent to only $74,000 in today's dollars. 30 years of hard work and iron discipline to have $74,000 in real purchasing power. Person B does it differently. It also saves $500 monthly. Same discipline, same sacrifice. But it puts it in the S&P 500 index, which historically returns an average of 10% per year. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing too risky. Just follow the American market. After the same 30 years, that person has $1,035,000. Same 500 monthly. Same discipline. Difference in result? $861,000. Almost $1 million difference simply because one person put the money to work and the other didn't. And here's where it gets truly shocking and most people completely miss the point. Of the final $1,035,000, only $180,000 came from the person's work. The other $855,000 came from money work. The money worked more than the person. Money generated more wealth than 3 decades of disciplined human work. This is not theory. It's not an opinion. It's verifiable math that repeats itself in any compound interest calculator you use. Quick experiment that will help me better understand who is watching this content. I want to map out where the people are who really understand this fundamental mathematics. Write your city in the comments now. Miami, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Austin, Bogota, Mexico City, Buenos Aires, Santiago, Lima, São Paulo, or wherever you are right now. Genuinely curious about the geographic distribution of those who are beginning to understand that linear work has mathematical limits, but compound capital has no limits other than the time available. Now, let's look at what Stanley Druckenmiller really did differently over his 45-year career. And here is where most people completely fail to understand his strategy. Druckenmiller didn't stop working. He didn't get rich by doing absolutely nothing. On the contrary. But he understood 3 fundamental mathematical principles that most never learn in their entire lives. First principle that separated Druckenmiller from the crowd. Every dollar you earn has 2 mathematically different possible jobs. Job A is to pay your bills today. Job B is to multiply and pay your bills in 20 or 30 years without you having to work. Most people use 100% of their dollars for Job A. The rich use 70 to 80% for Job A and 20 to 30% for Job B. This seemingly small difference of 20 to 30%, compounded over decades, is literally the mathematical difference between a stagnant middle class and a growing upper class. Second principle that Druckenmiller completely mastered. Speed of growth matters infinitely more than initial quantity. In a detailed analysis of Duquesne Capital Management's returns between 1981 and 2010, the fund had an average annual return of approximately 30%. This means that a single dollar invested in 1981 was worth $2,619 in 2010. $1 became $2,619. Meanwhile, even a dollar in S&P 500 would have become 39. Still great, but the difference between 10% a year and 30% a year over 3 decades is not 3 times as much. It's 67 times the final result. Third mathematical principle that governs wealth creation. Time is an exponential multiplier of all other factors involved. The sooner you put money to work, the exponentially more work it does for you throughout your life. I will demonstrate by example that it should be taught in every school, but never is. Person C starts investing $500 monthly at 25 and stops completely at 35. He only invested for 10 years. Total paid out of pocket, $60,000. Person D waits until he is 35 and invests $500 monthly until he is 65. He invested for a full 30 years. Total paid out of pocket, $180,000. 3 times more than person C. Result at age 65, assuming 10% average annual return. Person C, who invested only if $60,000 is $1,190,000. Person D, who invested $180,000, has $1,035,000. A person who invested 3 times less for just a third of the time has more money in the end. This completely violates human intuition, but it doesn't violate math. Compound interest math doesn't care about intuition. It only concerns time multiplied by growth rate. Druckenmiller started at 28, not at 25, but close. And most importantly, when he started, he didn't have significant capital inherited from his family. According to a detailed interview with Barron's in 2015, when Druckenmiller opened Duquesne Capital, he had less than $1 million under management. Most were friends and family who trusted him. But he had deeply understood these 3 mathematical principles, and he applied it religiously without exception for decades. Here's the part that no one tells you about labor versus capital, and it completely changes the game once you understand it. Work has mathematically diminishing returns. Your first hour of work of the day pays off a lot. You are rested, focused, efficient. Your 10th hour yields perhaps half the productivity. You are tired, distracted, making small mistakes. Your 15th hour may even have a negative return if you make a bad decision due to mental and physical exhaustion. Capital works exactly the opposite. It has increasing returns. First million is the hardest to accumulate. Second million comes faster. The 10th million comes even faster because you have more capital generating return on return on return. Comprehensive study by the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco in 2019 analyzed net worth of Americans across decades of life. The discovery was mathematically clear. Until the age of 40, the majority of wealth comes from direct work and forced economy. After 40, most growth comes from returns on existing capital. After 50, virtually all growth in net worth comes from capital working, not people working. People who understand this early put as much as possible to work as early as possible. People who don't understand continue working linearly until they are 60, and then realize too late that the game was always completely different. If it is so mathematically obvious that compound capital beats linear labor, why do the overwhelming majority of people still rely solely on labor? 3 mathematical and psychological reasons that Druckenmiller has identified in numerous interviews over the years. First fundamental reason: instant gratification versus decades-delayed gratification. Working more hours gives you more money at the end of this month. Bonus in 30 days. Investing gives you a significant real return over 3 decades. Bonus in 30 years. The human brain is programmed by millions of years of evolution to prefer immediate reward. Sugar now has always been worth more than health 30 years from now for our ancestors. Money now is always worth more than fortune in 30 years for the primitive brain. It's not your moral failure. It is simply deep biological programming. But hunter-gatherer biological programming doesn't mesh well with modern compound interest math. Second critical reason, visibility versus total invisibility of the result. When you work harder, you see results immediately and tangibly. More hours on the timesheet, more completed items on the list, more meetings, palpable feeling of productivity and progress. When you invest, you see absolutely nothing for entire years. First year, 10% on $1,000 is just $100. Ridiculous. It seems like a complete waste of time. 10th year, 10% of $25,000 is $2,500. It finally starts to make minimal sense. 30th year, 10% of $800,000 is $80,000 annually. Finally, impressive and visible. But it takes 3 full decades to get there. Most people give up completely within the first 5 years because they can't see enough visible results. Third reason, and probably most important of all, absolute lack of systematic financial education in schools and society. Comprehensive research from the National Endowment for Financial Education in 2022 showed a shocking discovery. Only 13% of Americans can correctly calculate simple compound interest on a basic test. 13%. This means that 87% of the population does not mathematically understand why compound capital beats linear labor over time. It's not laziness. It's not a lack of desire to learn. It is literally a lack of basic education about the fundamental mechanism that governs all wealth creation in modern human history. If what I have shown so far is making mathematical sense to you, I want you to think now of a specific person you know who is working 60 or 70 hours a week and yet is barely able to save any significant amount of money. Share this video with that person now. It could literally be the most valuable gift you give her this year because understanding these fundamental mathematical principles literally changes everything about how you view work and money for the rest of your life. Druckenmiller wasn't smarter than you genetically. He didn't have an MBA from Harvard or Yale. He graduated in economics and English from Bowdoin College, which is definitely not an elite university. He didn't come from an extremely rich family with connections. Father was a working-class chemical engineer in Philadelphia. Druckenmiller had exactly one advantage over most. He learned early on that there are 2 completely different games being played simultaneously in the financial world: game of work and game of capital. Most just play the work game their entire lives and are genuinely confused about why they never truly win. In the work game, the rules are simple and straightforward. You trade time for money. It works like this. You develop skill through education and experience. Company or client needs this specific skill. Company pays you by the hour or by the month to use your skill for their benefit. You take the money, pay monthly bills, repeat the cycle indefinitely. When you stop working for any reason, the money immediately stops coming in. Simple, direct, completely limited. In the game of capital, the rules are different and exponential. You exchange money today for assets that automatically generate more money tomorrow. It works like this. You save part of what you earn in the game of work. Purchase productive assets, shares in a profitable company, government or corporation bonds, property for rent, participation in a real business. Asset generates continuous return, quarterly dividends, semi-annual interest, monthly rent, distribution of profits. You take all the returns and buy even more assets. More assets automatically generate more returns. You buy even more assets. Cycle that feeds itself and accelerates. When you stop working, money continues to come in indefinitely because assets continue to work 24 hours a day, even while you sleep. Druckenmiller's absolutely genius move was to maximize brutal efficiency in the game of labor, specifically to accelerate entry into the game of capital. He didn't try to be the analyst who worked the most hours of everyone. He tried to be the analyst who generated the most real value per hour, actually worked. Subtle difference in language, but absolutely crucial in final mathematics. In a revealing interview with intelligent investor Graham and Doddsville in 2001, he explained methodology, focusing obsessively on the few macro variables that actually move entire markets, completely ignoring the constant noise of daily news, devoting uninterrupted deep time to analyzing long-term structural changes. This allowed them to work fewer total hours, but generate dramatically more valuable insights per hour invested. The practical result of this approach: he was able to save a high percentage of his income because he wasn't completely too exhausted to think about money at the end of each day. I was able to invest well because I still had quality mental energy to really and deeply analyze opportunities. I was able to maintain iron discipline because I wasn't making critical financial decisions in a constant state of stress and total exhaustion. Everything connected in system. Smart work generates usable capital. Well-invested capital automatically generates more capital. More accumulated capital reduces the absolute need to work. Mathematical virtuous circle rather than a vicious one. The vicious circle that imprisons the overwhelming majority works exactly the opposite and is brutal. You work long hours because you desperately need more money to survive. Long hours leave you physically and mentally exhausted. Deep exhaustion makes you make consistently bad decisions. Eating out because you don't have the energy to cook. Buying expensive conveniences. Spending money trying to alleviate chronic stress. Bad decisions systematically drain you of the extra money you worked so hard to earn. You realize you don't have enough money saved yet. So he works even more hours to compensate. He becomes even more exhausted. Make even worse decisions. Descending spiral with no visible end. Scientific data from the American Psychological Association in 2023 confirms this mathematically. People who consistently work more than 50 hours a week are 33% more likely to make impulsive and bad financial decisions compared directly to those who work 40 hours. Chronic fatigue severely impairs the prefrontal cortex, destroying its natural ability to make rational decisions and control destructive impulses. Druckenmiller said in an eye-opening presentation to the Robin Hood Foundation in 2012, "Real sustainable wealth does not come from maximizing gross income at any cost. It comes from intelligently maximizing the difference between income and expenses, and then investing that difference so that it consistently grows faster than your projected future needs." It sounds absurdly simple when you hear it. It's simple conceptually. But simple is definitely not easy to execute when you're stuck in the vicious circle of perpetual exhaustion. I will give you exact validated numbers on how to leave permanently. Based on a massive longitudinal study by Vanguard Research that meticulously tracked 5 million real investors for a full 15 years between 2005 and 2020. The study mathematically identified 5 specific behaviors that consistently separated those who accumulated truly significant wealth from those who remained eternally stagnant. 1 non-negotiable behavior: save absolutely minimum 15% of gross income every month, not liquid. Gross before taxes and all discounts. With 15% consistently saved and invested at 10% per year on average, you accumulate the equivalent of approximately 10 times your total annual income over 30 years. With just 10% saved, that's only 6 times. With just 5%, just 3 times. The difference between 5 and 15% is not proportionally 3 times the result. It's dramatically more because the compound speeds up exponentially with a larger base. Absolutely critical behavior. 2. Automate investment completely before you even see the money available. A University of Chicago Booth School study in 2018 proved definitively people who set up automatic debit for investment save an impressive average of 42% more over time than people who transfer it manually each month. Why exactly? Because correct decision is made once when you are completely rational and genuinely motivated, not every week when you are tired and constantly tempted by spending. Behavior 3. During the accumulation phase, invest a minimum of 80% in real growth assets such as stocks. Historical data from the Credit Suisse Global Investment Returns Yearbook, covering 123 years between 1899 and 2022, stocks returned a real average of 6.4% above inflation annually. Titles returned just 1.7. Difference seems small, 4.7, but made up of 3 complete decades. 100,000 invested in shares saw 1,186,000. Even 100,000 in titles saw only 269,000. Mathematical difference of 917,000 for choosing stocks over bonds during aggressive accumulation phase. Behavior 4 that separates winners. Never panic, sell during inevitable dips. Dalbar analysis from 2023. Average investor returned 6.8% annually over the last 2 decades. S&P 500 returned 9.5. A difference of just 2.7 doesn't seem dramatic. But over 20 years, 100,000 turning into 462,000 versus 634,000. Difference of 172,000 just for not selling in a panic. Behavior 5. Increase contributions proportionally with increases in income. Validated strategy. Maintain a relatively stable lifestyle and direct 70% of any increase in income directly into additional investments. This dramatically accelerates accumulation without sacrificing perceived quality of life because you've still improved 30%. Press like now if you agree that important financial decisions should be based exclusively on verifiable historical data, not empty hopes and emotional hunches. Your like concretely validates that there is real demand for rigorous, evidence-based content. Only 3% of viewers like it. Be a conscious part of those 3% who genuinely understand the difference between serious mathematical analysis and empty entertainment disguised as useful financial advice. Druckenmiller perfectly exemplifies all 5 validated behaviors. I saved aggressively from the beginning. Automated investments in the fund itself. Focused on growth assets. Never panic sold. And when I earned more, I invested proportionately more instead of just spending it all. Result? Transformed initial capital into I ended up with a fortune of $12 billion, even without being even remotely the person who worked the hardest in the office. How do you permanently get out of the linear work trap? How does the journey to compound capital effectively begin? The honest answer is not sexy. There is no magic shortcut. There is no hidden secret. But it works with absolute mathematical certainty when executed consistently. 5 practical steps validated by data from millions of real investors over documented decades. Step 1. Calculate your current real savings rate now. Take literally everything you saved in the last full 12 months. Divide by your total gross income for the last 12 months. Multiply by 100. This number is your current reality. If it's below 15%, you're mathematically trapped. If it is above 25, you are on the right path. If you are over 50, you will achieve complete financial independence in 10 to 15 years. Pure and simple mathematics. Step 2. Identify a specific cuttable waste equivalent to exactly 5% of your income. Don't try to cut 5% of absolutely everything. Cut 100% of something totally specific. Maybe it's a streaming subscription that you objectively don't use. Maybe it's a significantly more expensive car that you don't really need. Maybe it's restaurants 4 times a week when 2 would be perfectly enough. Identify specifically. Cut completely. Automatically redirect to investment. Step 3. Set up automatic monthly investment of that 5% in proven low-cost stock index fund. S&P 500 works perfectly. Total market fund works equally well. Anything with an administration fee below 0.2% per year. Strictly configure it to automatically leave the account on the exact same day that the salary arrives monthly. Completely automatic. 0 conscious monthly decisions. 0 temptation possible. Step 4. Automatically increase contribution by an additional % every 6 months. You won't even noticeably feel it. 1% of the monthly income is practically imperceptible in normal everyday life. But compounded mathematically over years, these progressive and consistent increases multiply the final result by 2 or even 3 times. After just 3 years of doing this religiously, you are saving 21% total if you started from 15. You are definitely on a solid path to truly serious accumulation. Step 5. Never, ever, under any circumstances, touch this money until your planned retirement. Treat it psychologically as if it simply didn't exist, as if it were someone else's bank account completely. Because mathematically, it really is. It's up to the future you. And you in the future will be immensely and eternally grateful to you today for the brutal but necessary discipline. If you've reached this exact point, you are genuinely different from the overwhelming majority. Most abandon it completely when content really requires deep thought. You stayed this far. This means something profound about your fundamental mindset. Subscribe to the channel to continue receiving analyses exclusively based on verifiable data from serious institutions. Next week, I will reveal another mathematical principle that separated extraordinary investors from average ones. Until then, the final truth about the trap. The trap is not the work itself. Work is a useful tool. The trap is to completely believe that linear work is the complete final solution. Druckenmiller worked intensely, but I knew from a very early age that work was exclusively fuel to feed a much larger machine of exponential compound capital. Most treat work as an absolute final solution. He works more when he needs more money. Work even harder when that doesn't work. Work until complete exhaustion, and it never even stops to ask, is there another completely different game going on that I should be playing simultaneously? It absolutely exists. It's the game of compound capital, and you can start playing today with any amount. $100 a month? 50? Up to 20. The important thing is not to start big, it's starting now. Because every month you wait is one permanently less month of exponential compound growth. And in the game of compound interest, available time is worth infinitely more than the initial amount. Druckenmiller has proven over 45 documented years that real financial intelligence is not about making more raw money. It's about understanding exactly where to strategically put what you earn. It's not about working more total hours. It's about making your money work exponentially more hours than you physically can. It's not about sacrificing the present completely. It's about balancing present and future mathematically in a sustainable way. The choice is exclusively yours. You can just continue in the game of linear work, exchanging hours for money indefinitely until your physical body can't take it anymore. Or you can start by playing both games simultaneously, using labor to generate capital and using capital to generate real freedom. One path leads to depending on work forever, until you die. Another leads to working out of conscious choice, not desperate necessity. Difference between the two is mathematics applied consistently. This review is for educational purposes only. All content is based on verifiable historical data and mathematical principles documented by institutions such as the Federal Reserve and the National Bureau of Economic Research. Nothing presented constitutes personalized financial advice. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Markets involve inherent risk. Each person has a unique situation. Always consult certified professionals before making decisions. The goal is to share mathematical frameworks for thinking about money, not to prescribe specific actions.